Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 3.00, and this is actually our 50th video, believe it or not. So something like 17 hours of content is already up there in the playlist that I have on my YouTube channel. And if you're just starting out now, I would encourage you to go back to the beginning, space those videos out into digestible amounts of time based on, your schedule and how much you can focus, and go ahead through those. And hopefully by doing that, when you get to this point, everything I'm about to say and everywhere we go from here, things will start to make sense and we'll start to connect some of those pieces to this very complex puzzle that is music creation, music production, and all of that within one particular software, which is Bitwig Studio. I've already said it before, but you don't have to be using Bitwig Studio to follow along here. Really, Bitwig Studio just happens to be the software that I've chosen to use, but you could use anything you wanted, so long as you're just a creative person and you're willing to try. So this is going to be our introductory video to this section, and I'm always very happy if people are watching these videos because I know chances are they didn't just stumble upon this by accident. They're going through and learning here with me, and by doing that, you're getting to see my logic and my process, and then hopefully for you in your head, that logic and that process will also start to make a little bit of sense. So I do thank you very much for finding this video and not just, searching for exactly what you need right now, finding it, because the way I look at it is this: there might be a great video out there on how to make a really, really killer, like trance drum line or like a trance bass line or something. So you watch that video and you're like, whoa, that was really, really cool. But the question I would ask you is, has that inspired you to create something yourself? After watching that video, do you suddenly feel the urge to open up a project and start making something? Maybe for some of you, you will. But for a lot of you, you won't. You'll just be like, oh, well, then I wonder what the next step is. And then you look for a video on how to do that next step and then how to do that next step. We've all done it, and it just doesn't really inspire us that much to go in there and start making something, because all we're doing is copying what somebody else has already done. And that can be very helpful sometimes, and I'm not saying you shouldn't ever do that. But for me, my goal from the very beginning has always been to help you, to push you to want to get into a project and to start making something your own, making something very creative and unique to you. I don't think that my videos are really going to help you become famous or help you make anything that's going to sell millions and millions of copies. If you're looking for that kind of help, you really should be focusing on your own image and on marketing and on advertising, because in this world, remember that there still is a music business. There still is a pop-dominated music industry that we have, and now it's actually kind of reached out to EDM, and that's why EDM and electronic music has become so popular, because now there is a whole infrastructure around it, and we see some of the quote-unquote top guys in the industry making tons of money doing this, and I can't promise that that's going to happen. Maybe for a few of you watching these videos, that will happen. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that can't be your focus from the start, because you're really going to hurt yourself if that's the way that you're approaching creating music, and you're going to get burned out pretty quickly, and you're probably going to want to quit, and you're probably going to want to give up. So my goal has always been to just introduce this idea of creating something that's unique to you. And I know all of you can do that, and I know all of you can make something really, really interesting. Part of that is doing away with traditional convention, but we'll talk about that more as we move forward. I want to start by just saying music is the universal language, the only universal language. So if I'm talking right now and you're not an English speaker, obviously everything I'm saying isn't going to make any sense at all. And I wish I spoke every language, because I'd love to make these videos available to everybody, regardless of if you spoke English or something else. Unfortunately, all I know is English, so I can only do it this way. But if I could, I would love to do it in as many ways as possible. The great thing about music and about the musical experience is that we all are going to experience it and feel it differently. But at the same time, we can all have an experience. We can all have a very pleasurable experience or something that's very negative, or we could listen to something that's going to make us feel sad, whatever. But if somebody sends me a track from Iceland and I listen to that track and then I pass it on to a friend of mine in Romania and they listen to that track and then they play it for their daughter and then she takes it to school and plays it, we're all going to experience it differently, but we can all understand it and we all know that it's music. And that's what makes this so amazing. It's not like a piece of art. It's not like the Mona Lisa, because to really fully experience it, number one, we're never going to be able to experience it in its original form. Same thing with music to a certain extent, but obviously it's in the Louvre now. And so you'd have to go to France, have to stand in a huge line with tons of people to experience this painting that has really been corrupted by what we have seen of it inside of society. So the Mona Lisa is everywhere. We all know that smile. We all know the stories. And so to go and see it might be kind of an underwhelming experience. Not only that, but it also is sitting in an art gallery and it's not really maybe placed where it was originally designed to be placed. So that changes that experience for us. But music is a little bit different, because if I make an MP3 file, I send you that MP3 file, it's the exact same file, but you're experiencing it somewhere else. However, what it is what it is, and it can be passed on to different people. And so it's like you're always getting the original. And that's really, really cool. And that's really different to like any other art form that's available. And it's the most easily communicated, if that's the right word for this, disseminated, is that the word I'm looking for? To spread your music ideas, because you can pass them here, 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 and it's always kind of the original. The one issue is that we all have different like playback systems, but the file itself, the ones and zeros, those are exactly the same. And the fact that we are all creative means we can all make our own unique music to share with people. And I would just say to ignore the judgments, because if you make a piece today that everybody really hates and goes, oh my God, that sounds nothing like what's in right now, that's terrible, I really hate it, that doesn't mean that 100 years down the road, that piece of music isn't going to be considered historically significant. Pretty much all of the music that's made that has kind of survived throughout history is music that people hated in the time because it was doing something different. But to push music, to push this art form forward, you have to be willing to do things differently, and you have to be willing to take those judgments, listen to those harsh comments, and just kind of block them out and ignore them. If your goal is to make trap music like trap music is made today, then you really have to listen to those judgments, and you have to try to take what they're saying and mold your new tracks into something that will fit for right now. But if you're like me and you're not super concerned with making things fit into the musical modes and molds that we have right now, then whatever, who cares? Just make what you want and let people listen to it and judge it however they seem fit. So cost in music creation is an interesting discussion point. I think, and this is my own opinion, that pretty soon, the next maybe 20 to 30 years, everybody is going to be creating music because it's going to be the cheapest and easiest way to express yourself. So for a long time, it's always been oil on canvas, right? Or some kind of very much more in a studio arts way of creating something. That's been how it's been for quite a long time. The issue with that is, number one, a lot of places now have kind of capitalized on that, and this is the shame about music production as well. So a lot of universities will offer studio arts programs, but they're quite expensive, and you have to pay for lab fees, and you have to pay for equipment. And even if you just have canvas, you still need to buy wood to make canvas stretchers. Then you have to make frames. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to buy all of the primer. You have to buy paints. You have to buy paint brushes. It's just like on and on and on, and just so much money you go into spending that it's really alienated a lot of otherwise very creative and talented people. Film, much the same way. Photography can be the same way. Dance can be quite expensive sometimes, etc., etc. Now, within the digital domain and with what we have to work with here, all we need is a computer and a couple audio files and a program that allows us to manipulate those in some way. And so that's becoming the cheapest way to produce something unique and something that's very individualistic. So you have your own project, you have your own song, you have your own file. Wonderful, right? You also can share these things. So if I just have one computer and I have Bitwig running, if I live in a village and I'm the only person who has a computer, I can share my computer and I can let other people start new projects, start from scratch. With art and with working on canvas, it's very difficult to do that. You can't get back to that original strip of canvas, right? Once you've put something on there, it's on there. And you have to work very hard to kind of get it off and to reset your canvas. In fact, you really can't. Once something has been done to it, it's permanently been done. And that's where music creation and music production is so interesting, because I can always go back and access old projects or start completely new ones. And that's another reason why I personally feel like music production, music creation, that's going to be the very norm for people in the next 20 or 30 years. So I'm stealing this next point from somebody much smarter than myself, and he made a great statement and it kind of struck a chord with me. And that's this idea of the creator or the artist as compared to the producer. Along those same lines, we have the process versus the workflow. And kind of sarcastically, I wrote, "Want to be a producer?" It seems like that's kind of a selling point for a lot of people out there, saying, you want to learn how to produce music? Come over here and I'm going to show you how to produce music. And to me, that's totally fine. You can be a producer. A producer is somebody who is going to sit down and at the very beginning, they're going to say, what is it I want to make? So what am I trying to make? And, they might have a client that says, look, we need a jingle for our commercial on selling shoes. Okay, so we have this new athletic shoe and we want a jingle. We want something that's pretty harsh. We want a dubsteppy sound that's going to work for this shoe commercial. So as a producer, you go, okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and work on that. Your deadline is 1 week. And so as a producer, you're going to do everything possible to get to your client that produced piece of music. But by production, we're taking out a lot of the creativity. And so we're fine with using loops, with buying sample packs if it's going to help us, with taking, default clips that we find inside of something like Logic Pro, or taking templates, working off a template that we've downloaded from the internet. All of that stuff is totally fair game. And that's really the way I look at production. I look at production and I kind of imagine a procedure. So I think of like a factory line. I'm thinking, okay, here's this mass-produced t-shirt or something. And music production can a lot of times be very similar to that, in that you take the same process, you take the same workflow every single time to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. That's why there's a lot of very uninteresting music that's put out today, because a lot of people online teach music production. So they teach how to go from point A to point B very quickly. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not really our goal. That's not really our purpose, especially not in this section. In this section, we're talking all about creation. So starting from scratch, not necessarily having a deadline, and working in our own process and kind of stumbling upon things and creating compositions that are very unique to us. If we work in something like Logic and we just pull up all the clips and we pull up all the presets, everybody else has access to those presets. Everybody else has access to those clips. So what we're doing is something that's not necessarily totally original. And I just wanted to bring up that distinction here because I think it's very important, and it's obviously something we could talk at a much greater length. So here's my logic for kind of the sections and what we've already covered. So we did foundations of sound in our first section. Then we talked about DJing, which I would also say was very much an intro to creating. Now we're into creation. So we're going to be always kind of working from scratch, going from a starting point at zero, and then by the end, having something tangible, having a full composition. Whether or not you like that or not, it doesn't matter, because you should be very proud of creating something, not just using clips and loops and whatever. After we do that, we're going to talk about synthesis, and we'll look at it from a creative point of view. So how can we take a synthesizer and take presets that everybody else has access to and maybe strip those down, go back to the most basic levels of synthesis, and then build up sounds that are totally unique to us and can serve our purposes as a creator. Then the next section, we probably will talk about production. And so we'll look at particular genres, particular styles of music and see, okay, how can we go about making those? But I want to make them from a creative standpoint. So starting from scratch, working with nothing, and taking what we've learned in these creative and synthesis sections, and then making some full-length tracks that maybe try to mirror some of the stuff we hear today. So let's talk about listening versus hearing. And I should say very much critical listening versus hearing. I mean, we're hearing all the time, right? Our brain is still processing those sounds. So if we go to like Chipotle or something and we're there with our friends, we can hear the music playing in the background, but we're not really listening to it. We're just hearing it. It's there, it's background, it's ambience. And like I mentioned before, though, if something kind of ticks your brain that says, oh, this is really interesting, you can focus in, and now suddenly you're actively listening. And I want all of us now as creators to be trying to actively listen to the world around us, not just to music, but to any and all sounds. Last night, I was trying to get to sleep, and it was really hot here, so I had the fan on, and my fan was making this really interesting, low humming noise, like a really kind of good, I thought, sample I could use for a sub. So I go up there, I record it, I filter everything out, and now suddenly I have the building blocks for a sub bass, and I got that from my bedroom fan going off, just because I was actively listening to it, and I thought, how can I use this inside of one of my own creations? And very quickly I figured out how I could do that. Same thing when you're just walking around. Maybe you live in a city, maybe you live way out in a suburb, or you live in a very rural community. It doesn't matter. Actively listen to that environment around you and constantly be thinking, analyzing those sounds based on what we've already talked about. Frequency, amplitude, timbre, those are the foundations to everything we're going to be doing moving forward. So I want you to try to actively listen not only to the music that's on around you, whether it's music you like or dislike, but also just the world in general. That brings me to my next point, which is influences and music history. But we're going to talk about music history not so much as a scholar, but as a creator or as an artist. So unfortunately, we don't really have time to go through and do like a music history type thing. Really, I would have had to do that before starting the DJ portion for it all to make sense. But what I want you to do is, if you have somebody that you really like right now, maybe there's a producer you really like, and let's just use BT as an example, okay? So there's BT, he's from around where I'm from, and maybe I'm really into his music right now. Well, apart from just listening to his music, what I'd want you to do is also search and find out who some of his influences were. All right, so maybe, for example, I think he is probably influenced by people like Stockhausen, like John Cage, like Pierre Schaeffer, sort of these pioneers of electronic music. So once you see who your influences are influenced by, go back and listen to that music and try to understand it. And from that point, go back and listen to those people's influences. And with literally 3 or 4 artists, you're going to go back to the very beginning of music, either ancient Greek, Roman music, maybe it goes back to Bach, to Beethoven, etc., to Baroque music, to classical music, to romantic music, and maybe you might take some odd turns and twists and you go out into rock music, or you end up at bluegrass somehow. That is what makes music so amazing. That's what makes creation worth doing, because everybody is being influenced by everybody else. And if you're willing to and you're open-minded enough, you're going to see how something like Bach or like Alison Krauss and Union Station can be super influential to your trap music or to your hip-hop music or whatever it is, right? We don't need to be prejudiced here. And music is full of prejudice. People are so purist to the music they listen to, and they don't even realize that the influences of the people they love probably trace back to Bach, probably trace back to Beethoven or to Mozart or Haydn. And for me, that was really an eye-opening thing when I was like, okay, I'm listening to Stockhausen right now. Let's see who he's been influenced by, and let's see who this guy's been influenced by. And it just really builds very, very quickly. So I want you to kind of do that if you're willing to, and it's going to be such a fun and such a crazy journey. It's going to take forever, and that's why you can keep learning and you can keep getting better and keep being influenced by different things. So I want to bring that up now when we're talking about creation because it is very relevant. And we have to try to look at music history more as in a creative and artistic sense versus a scholarly sense. So a lot like art history, where you're studying the creative art and some of the tangible things that artists have made in a particular time to understand that history, to understand that culture even, especially if we're talking about ancient art, right? We look at like Egyptian hieroglyphs and we look at how they've made these figures, and then we can conclude, oh, look at how rigid and look at how consistent this Egyptian art has been over time. Why was that? Why did they do that? And the answer, which is a super dumbed down, simplified version, we're not going to go into art history here, but there was a religion and a hierarchy at the top that needed that stability. There was this idea that the pharaoh, he is the god, he is Ra incarnate. And so, to keep people doing what they had to do, they were very much consistent with how they depicted forms and how they went about with their art, their architecture, etc. And that's all well and good, but if I'm an artist today, I'm probably looking at Egyptian art in a very different light. I'm looking at it thinking, this makes me feel a certain way. I'm influenced by that because it looks like this. Not so much worried about the time period or the culture or anything else. That is important. That is very, very important. But for us, and to keep it a little easier, I want you to listen to things and think more about how it makes you feel. Not so much what was going on at that time or with that composer, etc. But just focus on the feelings you get. Focus on whether or not you like that music, and then why you may or may not like that music. That's what's most important. And so instead of, starting and saying, okay, we are at 200 BC and here is this, we're listening to that music and we're listening to it in the present day, but focusing just specifically on the feelings and the emotions that it can convey to us as the listener. And again, I could talk a lot longer about that, but we need to move on to another very important bullet point, which is expectations and results. One of the worst things you can do is have a really, really firm goal and expectation in mind when you sit down and start making music. And this is where a lot of 13, 14, 15-year-old producers go awry, because they're listening to somebody that they really, really like, and their goal and their only focus is, how can I make it like that? How can I make it sound like this? You're never going to be able to make it sound like that. And you're going to spend 6 to 8 months getting so frustrated because the results and the expectations, it's just not lining up. You're expecting something to be really good and to sound just like this other track, but you're not that person. You don't have that mind. Your creativity is different. And so you're not going to get there. And if you do get there, it's after doing years and years of creative practice and work to kind of understand how everything is going on. And so meanwhile, you've spent 8 months and you have 0 full tracks to show for it, and you just quit and you give up. And I don't want you guys doing that here. What I'm not trying to say is, if you are a producer already, which maybe some really good producers are watching this, don't stop doing what you're doing. Keep making the music that you like to make. And you might already have a really good process that works for you. But at the same time, my projects, my experiments that I'm going to give out to you are designed to just kind of help you create in a new way. You don't have to put this music out to the world, but it should keep the passion there. It should keep all of this fresh. So always throw out expectations and results, at least for a long time. Don't worry about the result. Just worry about finishing and being proud of what you've done and having fun when you're doing it. I think of music creation, really as a distraction from the world as a whole. And we all need that sometimes. We've all probably been through things that we'd like to forget. And sometimes, life isn't always a whole lot of fun. As human beings, we go through such crazy transformations, each and every one of us. And it's hard sometimes for other people, even people you trust, to understand what's going on in your life and some of the stresses and some of the problems that you're facing. And I know this is getting really philosophical and psychological, but I think it's important that we go there, because music and music creation, when we're not focused on expectations and we're not focused on results, can be very therapeutic, and it can be such a great distraction from the world we live in. And we all need that, whether you're a rich billionaire or you're really struggling to make ends meet. You need these distractions, and I think music creation is great for that, especially when you aren't worried so much about the results and you're just having fun and experimenting and seeing what comes out the other end. So have lots of fun. That's what this is all about. Once you stop having fun, that's when you should email me and say, hey, look, Brian, what are some other ideas? What are some other ways I can try to create music? Because right now it's just not a whole lot of fun for me. It feels like work. When you're producing, it can be work, and it will be work, and there will be times when you're not having fun. And I guarantee you a lot of the top producers out there today who make these top 40 hits and everything else, they're not always having a whole lot of fun. But what I want you to do when you're in the creation stage is to have tons of fun from start to finish. So the lesson frequency moving forward may not be as consistent. We may not have videos coming out all the time on my channel, but that's because I'm going to approach this segment and I'm really going to be brainstorming, and I'm really going to be putting myself to the test as to what sort of creative projects can I offer up. So we'll be looking inside of Bitwig and looking at the very technical, like here is what this tool can do. But then it's all on you, and it's all about creating something using these restrictions. So like I did with that DJ mix, I'm going to give you certain parameters and say, look, you have to work within these parameters. Now go and create something. And I know at the time when I was in school and I took a course, and the first thing we got was just like, here are 5 samples, here's Reaper, make something, bring it back in a week. At the time, I was like, man, what the F is this? Why are you assigning this to me? I don't even know anything. But probably that was one of the best productions I've ever made, to be 100% honest. And the reason for that was because I knew so little. And at that time, all I had been doing was making dance loops and trying to make sort of poppy sounds and trying to make sort of the popular style of that time, which was, kind of like a vocally trance and an upbeat and happy house type music. But doing that assignment really changed things for me, because suddenly it wasn't so much about trying to imitate other people as it was just, what sort of creativity am I going to be doing? Where am I going to go with this? So you can't judge music. You can't take 2 tracks and say, this one is better than this one. It just doesn't work like that. And people all the time try to do that. And we have all of these lists out there. Top 10 lists and top 5 lists are like the most popular thing today. And it's horrible, because this is all so subjective. And the only reason we like reading those things are because as human beings, we love to have rankings. We always want things to be definitive. We want it to be, here's number 1, here's number 2. But with creation, it doesn't work that way. It really, really doesn't. And one thing that bothers me quite a bit about the studio arts world and even about music creation is that when you have like a critique, for example, and you go in there and you sit around and everyone presents their work and then it's open for discussion, open for criticism, it can be so brutal. People are really, really harsh, especially in certain environments where it's all about competition. It's all about trying to be the best amongst your peers. And that's really scary. And that's one of the reasons why art school may not always be so great, because even the teachers will sometimes come out and be super, super critical. Now, I've learned to develop a really hard shell. So it doesn't really bother me if people are ever critical about my stuff, but I know, and I've seen it really kill people and really turn them off from creating anything. And that's not what I want here, because I want you to always know that your work is your work. And if you're proud of it, that is all that matters. If you're proud of it and you want to keep making more things, great. If you're too scared to put those things out to the world, that's fine. Don't do it, because sometimes the criticism that comes back can really, really hurt you. And that's the last thing I want. I don't want anybody putting something out and then getting hurt by it. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about here. In the next videos, we're going to be getting back into Bitwig, starting from the basics again, and very quickly you're going to be getting one of these sort of creation projects and just fun little ideas I have for trying to make compositions. And that's really what it's all about. And if these videos become more and more popular at some point, I'd love to do some Google Hangouts or something with all of you guys, and we can talk about these things, and we can share our work, and we can listen to it and enjoy it, and just get stronger as people, and have a really good time. So thank you for watching this video, and I will catch you again in the next lesson. Take care.